Environmental Science Unit 7, Human Communities and the Environment. Following are the main topics of this chapter: human population growth, carbon footprint, resettlement and rehabilitation of people, environmental movements, environmental justice, National Green Tribunal, environmental philosophy and ethics, environmental communication and public awareness. Human population is increasing at a very fast rate. In fact, since Industrial Revolution, which took place in 1800, there is a continuous upward trend in the population rise. Already by 2020, we have crossed the limit of 7 billion. And according to the computer simulations, it is predicted that by 2100, population will cross more than 11 billion mark. So this is a matter of concern, because when human population increase, there is tremendous pressure on environmental resources. Human population is increasing at an explosive rate. However, resources which are present on Earth are limited. Therefore, our natural environment is under attack, and we are moving towards an uncertain future. Human population density is already very high. Countries like India and China, they are maximum populated, and therefore all the countries are very crowded. So our Earth has to deal with the pressure of rising population. There are a number of factors responsible for high population growth. One of it is increase in agricultural output. With availability of fertilizers, pesticides and high quality seeds, we are able to increase agricultural output, and therefore population is rising up. Second, with advancement in science and technology and with better medical facility, we are able to decrease death rate and infant mortality rate. Both of these factors have contributed to more population growth. Scientific innovations have also resulted in more surplus of resources and also better comfort for everyone. And this is also another reason why the number of people are always increasing in the world. Further, still, many people are not able to afford education, and therefore this illiteracy and lack of awareness related to the impact of population on environment and society has resulted in more number of people on this planet. With high population growth, we can expect number of impacts. For example, with increase in population growth, there is pressure on land resources. We need land for agriculture, for making urban housing, etc. And therefore in that process, large number of trees are cleared down. Secondly, with clearing of forest, we can expect biodiversity loss. And therefore, the species which are very valuable for us and for maintaining ecological balance are gradually getting lost. More urbanization, we need to provide sanitary facility and drinking water, which is still not available with everyone. People are still living in poor sanitary facilities and lack of drinking water. Industrialization is also required to meet the demand of population. With industrialization, we can expect that there will be more pollution all across the world. Moreover, with industrialization and with more cutting down of trees, ultimately our land will suffer. Land will become more prone to soil erosion and also landslide, salinization, etc. And therefore the quality of land will degrade. Rise in the number of population also result in more waste generation. Already our earth is overfilled with waste, and with increase in population in future, we can expect more waste to be generated on this world. Further, rise in population also indicate that we will not be able to provide fresh water to everyone, because fresh water resources already limited. We just have 3% of water as fresh water. 2% of it is not available to us because it is present in glaciers and ice cap. So just very little, around 1% of water is available in rivers and groundwater resource. Most of these groundwater resources and freshwater resources, they are already polluted, and it is expected that in coming time period, most of the population will not be able to access this fresh water resource. With rise in population, we can expect more pollution and problems like climate change. So more the number of people, more vehicles they will use, and ultimately CO2 and greenhouse gases will increase. Not only this, in polluted environment, productivity of a person is also affected. Healthy person can work for a long time period. On the other hand, a person who suffers with various respiratory disorders by living in polluted world will not be able to contribute towards economy of the country, and that will result in loss of productivity. So we need to control population. So population growth can be controlled by using following ways. First, we need to strictly follow the marriageable age. In our country, 18 years is the marriageable age for girls and 21 years for male, and therefore we need to strictly follow it and avoid any kind of child marriage or marriage at the early stage. Second is that we need to provide better education, because it is only through education that people can learn what are the impact of population rise on our planet. Third, better employment also helps in controlling population growth, because when people are employed, they are able to afford good education, and therefore then they try to prefer a small size family. There is also a need to make people aware about family planning programs and also the methods which can be used to control family size. We can also follow the practice of giving incentive. So for couples who are producing less children, they should be provided with incentives like tax benefits or promotion, etc. Next topic is carbon footprint. So carbon footprint is the amount of greenhouse gas, mainly carbon dioxide, which is released in atmosphere by human or anthropogenic activities. So the amount of CO2 that we are contributing is known as our carbon footprint. In fact, carbon footprint can be calculated at individual level, national level, and also at the global level. So the CO2 that we contribute is our carbon footprint. So to reduce carbon footprint, we need to assess our lifestyle pattern. For example, are we using the local fruits? So if we are dependent on local fruits, then definitely the amount of fuel which is burnt to transport those fruit is comparatively less. But however, are we using exotic food? In that case, the fruit are transported from other countries and the amount of CO2 is much more high. So we need to analyze our lifestyle pattern. Same way, we can question ourselves, are we using electrical appliances that are energy saving in nature? If not, then we are contributing to high amount of CO2. Another question could be, how are we transporting from one place to another? Are we using public transport or are we using our private vehicle? In case we are using private vehicle, then the carbon footprint is much more high. So carbon footprint can be quantitatively assessed for each individual, for any institute or the country, by analyzing the lifestyle pattern of the people. And further, in order to reduce carbon footprint, we need to change our lifestyle pattern. We need to move towards renewable energy resource. We need to reduce our carbon footprint by following and by taking up public transport or carpool, etc. At industrial level, we can control carbon emissions by providing incentives in terms of carbon credit. So the amount of carbon dioxide which is reduced by industry is provided with the monetary benefits in terms of carbon credit. So these are various measures by which carbon footprint can be controlled. Resettlement and rehabilitation issues of project affected families. Whenever developmental projects are given approval, that is a boon for the country, but on the other hand, large number of people, especially the local people, get displaced. Resettlement and rehabilitation issues can arise from various situations. For example, first, dam construction. Second, mining. And third, creation of national park also results in displacement of people. First is displacement of families due to dam. Whenever dams are constructed, we need area for a large reservoir, and in that process there is also a chance for submergence of low-lying places. So to avoid the risk of submergence, we need to shift people. So large number of people are displaced due to dam construction. For example, Sardar Sarovar Dam, which is constructed in the state of Gujarat, has resulted in displacement of around 573 villages, which include more than 3 lakh people. Displacement issues can also arise due to mining work. For example, Jharia coal field in Jharkhand is one of the most popular coal field site, and since coal can catch fire easily, therefore local residents are witnessing issues related to underground fire, and they were asked to vacate the area. Now this could result in evacuation of around 0.3 million people of Jharia, and also it will involve a cost to relocate them. Third, whenever national parks are created, we also displace people, especially the local tribe. National parks are those places where animals are provided with legal protection. Moreover, rules are very strict in national park and no one is allowed to stay inside national park. So if suppose in that forested area there was earlier any tribal community, then in that case tribal community need to be shifted out. Now this can result in displacement issues. For example, Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary in Kerala has resulted in displacement of 53,472 tribal families. And out of these, till 2003, only 843 families could get the land. So tribal feel cheated because they are not provided with any alternate home or alternate source of livelihood. And in that case, they may result in negative impact on the environment. For example, they can encroach into forest in large number. They start cutting down the trees, and also they started constructing the huts and digging well. All of this resulted in injuries and death to people, and also it affected the environment of Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary. So whenever there is resettlement and rehabilitation of people, then there are number of effects. For example, there will be lack of employment and livelihood options for them. Further, especially in the case of tribal groups who are well associated with each other, sudden resettlement and rehabilitation results in their disruption in social fabric. The bonding and attachment of people is lost. Third, resettlement and rehabilitation also affect kinship system, marriages, social and cultural function, and even folk song, folk dance and rich cultural heritage of tribal people gets vanished due to their displacement. Person who is getting displaced also face issues like loss of identity and loss of intimate link between people and environment. Further, tribal people and the local people of forest, they are also very knowledgeable in terms of local species. They knew which species of plant can be utilized for medical purpose. But however, if we shift them, then age-long indigenous knowledge is just lost in seconds. Resettlement and rehabilitation in India is done by the policy of 2007. This policy is also known as National Rehabilitation and Resettlement Policy 2007. Under this policy, a family which is getting displaced due to development project is provided with compensation, monetary compensation, physical rehabilitation, that means alternate home is also provided. Economic rehabilitation means alternate source of livelihood is provided to that family, and wherever they are shifted, their infrastructure is also provided to them. But however, we still face number of issues. So one of the example where resettlement and rehabilitation was not done accurately is the construction of Pong Dam. So Pong Dam was constructed in the state of Himachal Pradesh in 1960, and this dam was supposed to provide electricity and water for irrigation to other states, especially Rajasthan and Punjab. So in this project, large number of people were displaced. In fact, when it was thought to provide water from Himachal to Rajasthan, then there was also a need to construct Indira Gandhi Canal. And in that, additionally, 20,722 people were displaced. So, out of 30,000 families which were uprooted due to Pong Dam, till now, only 16,000 were eligible for allotment because they had land records. They were the ones which could actually show that land belongs to them. But there are many families, around 14,000 families, who have not been able to get any kind of compensation or monetary help. So in this entire project, we have noticed that Rajasthan was still thinking about resettlement, but they resettled people in far corners of desert bordering Pakistan. So the question is, are we providing correct place for residing and resettlement to the people who are getting displaced? And second thing, what about the families who are not able to produce any kind of land record in that area, but they were residing there for a long period of time? In this entire case study, we find that Punjab was not at all involved in resettlement and rehabilitation. It was only Rajasthan, and also those people who were shifted, they were provided with a home that was in very harsh conditions of deserts. Next part is environmental movement, and the first movement is Bishnois of Rajasthan. Bishnoi community of Rajasthan is very popular community in the state of Rajasthan, and it is actively working for nature conservation. In fact, they are the disciple of Guru Jambaji Maharaj, who belonged to 1400 AD, and according to Guru Jambaji Maharaj, environment should be taken into consideration. In fact, Guru Jambaji Maharaj noticed that with clearing of large area of forest, entire Rajasthan was becoming water scarce, and the conditions were severely harsh conditions existed in Rajasthan. So it was required that we need to be in association with nature and protect all the forest and tree cover. So Guru Jambaji Maharaj had laid 29 principles, and all of these 29 principles are related to protection and conservation of forest and animals. So disciples of Guru Jambaji Maharaj, that means Bishnoi community, is still following all the principles which are laid down by the Guru. And according to these principles, Bishnoi community is working towards nature conservation, and they are always in mutual association with plants and animals. In 1700 AD, when the king of Jodhpur had ordered to cut the trees in order to build a palace, then ladies, especially Amrita Devi, was inspired by the practices or religious belief of Guru Jambaji Maharaj, and she just hugged the trees in order to save those forests. Later on, Amrita Devi was killed. Not only Amrita Devi, but 363 other women were killed. When King of Jodhpur came to know about this incident, he immediately withdrew his order, and later on all these forests and trees were protected. Bishnoi community is still active, and it was Bishnoi community who had reported and filed a case under Violation of Wildlife Protection Act 1972 when they noticed that few filmmakers have killed and hunted down chinkara and blackbuck in the area of Rajasthan. Second environmental movement is Chipko movement. Chipko movement is a very popular movement in the present state of Uttarakhand. It is also known as tree hugging movement because it was based on Gandhian philosophy of non-violence. So rapid deforestation was witnessed in the state of Uttarakhand in order to make roads for protection against Chinese aggression, and also rapid deforestation was done to develop the area. This deforestation, especially near Alaknanda river of Uttarakhand, resulted in a major flood tragedy of 1970. So local people were witnessing and they were experiencing the issues and outcome of deforestation. They were able to experience that when trees are cleared down, then it could result in flood tragedy also. Further, for a long period of time, local villagers were unable to use the forest resource. They were denied to use the forest resource, and also a local small-scale industry with the name the Shauli Gram Swaraj Mandal was totally denied to use the trees, and this proposal was totally rejected by Forest Department. So there was also a conflict between the rights of local people and also the development process that was going on. So local people are not creating much negative impact on the forest, and still they were denied to use the forest resource. On the other hand, on the name of development, there was continuous clearing up of the trees. Further, Simon Company, one of the sports good company, was allowed to cut trees in the present state of Uttarakhand. Now this was the time period when local people could not tolerate it further. And therefore, Chandi Prasad Bhatt, Gaura Devi and Sundarlal Bahuguna started the movement that is very well known as Chipko movement. C.P. Bhatt was the founder of the Shauli Gram Swaraj Sabha, and this was the company which was denied to use the forest by the Forest Department. Gaura Devi was a local lady of that area, and Sundarlal Bahuguna was inspired from the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi, and therefore this movement was based on non-violent movement. So the local ladies were very well aware that if forests were cleared down, then they have to move more uphill to collect their basic resources like fuel wood or water. They could also face issues like flood, and therefore all the local ladies, they hugged the trees. And ultimately government had to agree on the demand, and further Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had also imposed ban to cut down the trees in the state of present Uttarakhand. So Chipko movement is one of the most successful movement of our country. Next movement is Epico movement. Inspired from Chipko movement, Epico movement was started in the southern India. So actually Epico movement originated in Uttar Kannada district of Karnataka. So Uttar Kannada district of Karnataka was a place where this movement started. So local people were witnessing a rapid deforestation in the state of Karnataka. In fact, this rapid deforestation was done for cultivating timber crop, which are commercially important trees. So the healthy forest was getting lost. So Epico movement used various techniques for raising awareness, like walking on foot in the forest, photograph demonstration, folk dance, street dramas, etc. At the local level, Environment Conservation Center was formed, which is also known as Parisar Samrakshana Kendra, and this conservation center started following practices. First, the main objective was to protect existing forest and prevent any kind of deforestation. Second, regeneration of trees by planting more trees in that area. Third, plantation of new trees. And finally, to conserve the natural resources and to use natural resources wisely without any wastage. And lastly, we can say that this movement was very effective in creating awareness regarding the forest. And this movement was again based on tree hugging. So to protect the trees from cutting down, local people hugged the trees just like in Chipko. And again, this Epico movement is considered to be one of the most successful environmental movement of our country. Next movement is Silent Valley movement. So Silent Valley is the area in Kerala, and we know Kerala is part of Western Ghat. It is extremely rich in biodiversity. So number of unique species which are present in Kerala are very high. But in 1973, Planning Commission of India approved a hydropower project at the cost of 25 crores on the river of Kunti Punja, which is flowing in Silent Valley zone. So the dam construction was approved, and it was planned that this dam will generate electricity of 240 megawatt per year. But it was Romulus Whittaker, a popular scientist and also the founder of Madras Snake Park and Madras Crocodile Park, who noticed that using the land of Silent Valley for dam construction could result in extreme ecological impacts. It was Romulus Whittaker who sensitized people about this issue, and further people raised their concerns related to ecology, forest cover and animals. In this movement, Kerala Shastriya Sahitya Parishad was formed and a mass movement was organized. Even poet Sugantha Kumari played very important role in Silent Valley movement. And ultimately, because of Silent Valley movement, this project, that is Silent Valley Hydroelectric Project, was called off. In fact, the area, the pristine area and the beautiful area of Silent Valley was later in 1985 converted into Silent Valley National Park. And the then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi had formally inaugurated this Silent Valley National Park. So sometimes these environmental movements become so necessary to save our forest and animal resource. Next movement is Narmada Bachao Andolan. So Narmada Bachao Andolan is related to the construction of Sardar Sarovar Dam in the state of Gujarat. So for a long period of time, the states like Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat were not able to decide how Narmada river should be used appropriately, and therefore Narmada Water Dispute Tribunal was formed. In 1968, this tribunal was formed, and further 10 years later, in 1979, this tribunal gave its judgment, and the judgment was that Sardar Sarovar Dam was approved. So with construction of Sardar Sarovar Dam, it was clear that large number of villages will get submerged, and those people need to be vacated and they need to be shifted to some other location. So Sardar Sarovar Dam was approved on 1978. This bank, when it was approved for construction, then immediately World Bank agreed to fund the project. And it was clear that this project would result in displacement of around 1 million people and would nearly submerge 3,50,000 hectares of forest area and 2 lakh hectares of cultivated land. In 1985, Medha Patkar raised her voice along with several other activists regarding violation of tribal right. So in this movement, that means Narmada Bachao Andolan, which was started by Medha Patkar in 1985, one of the main concerns was related to tribal rights. And according to the judgment given by the tribunal in 1979, it was not clear how compensation would be provided to the tribal people and how they will be relocated, because tribal people are those who have been staying in an area for a long period of time. They don't have any required land records to show that a particular land belonged to them. In that case, number of people would be shifted, but they will be denied of any kind of compensation. This Narmada Bachao Andolan also resulted in the question related to what kind of development practices are we following and are they justified at the cost of environment? Third point is that activists also questioned the design, implementation, settlement and rehabilitation policies of this project. So Narmada Bachao Andolan was started, and in this again non-violent philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi was practiced. The people organized Jan Vikas Sangharsh Yatra and they started marching from Rajya, that is Madhya Pradesh, to Gujarat. The total number of protesters were around 6,000 who marched a long way. So this movement was successful, and it was really successful in pressurizing World Bank against the project. Later, activists demanded that dam height should not be increased. It should be reduced to 88 meters, and the proposal was of 130 meters. So more the height, more will be the destruction on environment. So the activists related to Narmada Bachao Andolan were favoring a lower height dam. Narmada Bachao Andolan was really successful because World Bank was pressurized and later World Bank withdrew from the project. However, Supreme Court gave the judgment And according to this judgment, Sardar Sarovar Dam was approved on the condition that height would not exceed 90 meters. So Narmada Bachao Andolan is successful because it helped in providing voice to the tribal people. It was also successful in raising the environmental concern. But, however, Sardar Sarovar Dam has already been constructed in the state of Gujarat. Next part of this chapter is related to National Green Tribunal. National Green Tribunal was established under National Green Tribunal Act 2010, and the objective of National Green Tribunal was to provide fast judgment in the cases of environment. So earlier all the cases were filed in lower court, high court and Supreme Court. But if we just let environmental cases for pending for a long time period, then by that time environment would have been damaged, and therefore we need fast judgment in the cases especially related to environment. So NGT was formed, and NGT provide fast judgment within the time span of 6 months. NGT is located in 5 different places. First, Delhi, Chennai, Kolkata, Bhopal and Pune. In NGT, we have a chairperson who is appointed by central government in consultation with Chief Justice of India. Also, there are 10 to 20 judicial members and expert members. All these members, they are appointed by selection committee which is formed by central government. NGT has given very strong judgment. For example, in 2013, when Uttarakhand flood tragedy took place, then Alaknanda hydropower was ordered to compensate the petitioner. In 2015, all diesel vehicles were banned in Delhi, especially those vehicles which were more than 10 years old, because they were having outdated technology and were emitting large amount of pollutants. In 2017, NGT has ordered a ban on open defecation, and also waste dumping was banned in the areas of Yamuna floodplain. And if any person violated this rule, then compensation, or you can say penalty of 5,000 was also imposed. In 2017, when Art of Living Festival was organized on Yamuna floodplain, then NGT imposed penalty of around 5 crore. Lastly, in Delhi, plastic bags are banned, especially those bags which are less than 50 micron thickness. So NGT is doing commendable work in order to control pollution and in order to save the environment. But still NGT face number of challenges. For example, there is lack of benches. We need to expand NGT all across the world, especially all across the country. Second, the number of environmental cases are rising up. Third, there is no specific guideline or methodology to determine the amount of damages which should be imposed on any person. Then NGT sometimes do not get support from local government and also the central government. Next point is that Central Pollution Control Board and State Pollution Control Boards are the main boards which provide evidence of environmental pollution. But sometimes delay on the part of CPCB and State Pollution Control Board can delay tribunal's judgment. And NGT should also be provided with extra powers so that they are not restricted to give decision in the area of environment. CNG in Delhi. So Delhi is among the top 20 most polluted cities in the world. On July 28, 1998, Supreme Court ordered that all vehicles in Delhi like bus or automobiles, they will be based on CNG. CNG has two advantages. It's easy to store, it's easy to transport and also emit less pollution. But CNG also has few disadvantages. First, we need to increase more CNG fueling station all across India. And also whenever we are implementing a CNG in our vehicle, then it requires a large space. But despite disadvantage, CNG has proved to be a boon for Delhi. because by implementation of CNG in all commercial vehicles since 1998, we have noticed a decline in pollution levels. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. So Swachh Bharat Abhiyan was initiated by our Prime Minister Narendra Modi on 2nd October 2014. So this mission was to honor Mahatma Gandhi's vision of Clean Bharat. So the action plan of this scheme was formulated by Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation. And the main objective of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan were: first, to provide better sanitation; second, to provide safe and drinking water to all the people; third, to provide effective waste disposal system; and last, to provide or to construct toilets so that country become open defecation free. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan was really effective because percentage of toilets have increased from 3% to 10% by 2019. Further, large platforms were used for communicating the message of cleanliness, and therefore everyone got to know that everyone need to keep the environment clean and healthy. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan in urban ecosystem was especially the scheme related to urban areas like Delhi and other metropolitan cities. And under this, large number of toilets and hygienic conditions were created in the urban places. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan rural ecosystem was related to rural areas or villages. It is also known as Swachh Bharat Gramin, and under this scheme all the villages were made open defecation free, and the government is continuously working to construct more toilets so that in future more villages become open defecation free. Further issues related to waste disposal are also being considered under Swachh Bharat scheme. There are a number of initiatives which are also taken by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. One of it is National Environment Awareness Campaign. National Environment Awareness Campaign is conducted by Ministry of Environment and Forest with the help of regional resource agencies and non-government organizations. So this is the scheme where local people at every level are made aware about the environmental problems. So under National Environment Awareness Campaign, campaigns like Jungle Walk or discussion, seminars, they are conducted regularly so that local people are aware about the environmental issues. Ministry of Environment has also started a very popular scheme of National Green Corps. This is also known as Program for Eco Club. So this was initiated in the year 2000 to 2001, and under this scheme every school had to have a eco club. So we have right now a network of more than 1,20,000 schools, and all the students are motivated to protect the environment through these eco clubs. So the eco clubs were constructed to impart knowledge on environment, to develop skills toward conservation of environment, and further to develop attitude towards environmental protection. Another objective was to sensitize students toward environmental protection by conducting field trips to the polluted site and also to the natural sites like forest. Next, to develop logical reasoning among students so that they can make right choice and they can actually analyze which type of practice can contribute to environmental problems. Lastly, students were also involved in action plan related to environment conservation. Under National Green Crop, there is a National Steering Committee at the country level, followed by State Steering Committee, District Implementation and Monitoring Committee. So all these three committees frame guidelines and rules for every eco club. At the school level, there is a school teacher in charge for eco club, and 50 to 60 students are guided to save environment and they are motivated to work for environmental cause. So in all the eco clubs which are formulated under National Green Corps are involved in protecting environment. So they conduct lectures, seminar, conference to raise environmental awareness. These National Green Corps or Eco Club also conduct field visit. They organize campaign and rallies related to environment issues. Also, these National Green Corps are involved in tree plantation, cleanliness drive. Students are motivated to use vermicomposting, that means converting biodegradable waste with the help of manure, and to construct kitchen gardens, etc. Environmental ethics. So environmental ethics is branch of philosophy that deals with moral relationship of humans with environment and with non-human species. So ethical considerations are really important because that results in actual realization of our impact on environment. And because of these ethical considerations, there is tremendous increase in environmental movement. All these environmental movements are trying to change the attitude of humans to environment. So there are three views in environmental ethics: anthropogenic view, biocentric view, and ecocentric view. Anthropocentric view is that humans are supreme and we are above all other species. So if we follow anthropocentric view, that could result in destruction of trees and destruction to all the other species. In fact, in capitalist world, we are also thinking in terms of benefit for human needs. We are thinking for a short term benefit, and therefore we are many a times following this principle of anthropocentric view. Second view is biocentric. Biocentric means that humans are below all other species. We are not supreme. In fact, any harm to us is actually beneficial for survival of other species. So in this view, other species apart from humans are given much more importance. Third view is ecocentric view, which states that humans are just equal to other species and we are just part of this ecological balance. So humans are neither above nor below other species, and we are just equal to other species. So when we are following ecocentric view, we tend to have compassion for other species as well as for our planet Earth. Ethical questions are really important because these ethical questions help us in self-realization of the problem. For example, do you think that we should clear forest for the sake of human need? Another question could be, should we continue with the procedure of testing drugs on animals? So by testing drugs on animals, we are trying to increase the number of humans, but on the other hand, these animals, they are not giving any kind of consent. We are just torturing and exploiting these animals. And what about their population? So all these questions are really necessary. Religion and environment. Ethical support for environmental conservation is mentioned in all religion. In fact, all religions support that earth is created by superpower or God, and therefore earth should be treated ethically. In Buddhism, there is a notion of karma. So the practices that we follow are really important. So Buddhism highlights that we should follow sustainable practices and all these resources should be available for the next generation also. Not only this, in Buddhism we also know that Lord Buddha got enlightenment under peepal tree, and therefore these religions also provide importance to trees and animals. Second is Christianity. In Christianity, 100 verses are written which are related to conservation of plants and animals. Not only this, other religions like Hinduism or Islam also tend to have some principles which are based on environmental conservation. For example, ancient literatures written, for example, Vedas, Upanishads, they have highlighted importance of trees. Not only this, in Islam also, it is very well mentioned in Quran that we need to protect environment. So all the religion favor environmental protection. We need to integrate these religious practices and traditional belief into conservation strategies. Government should ensure conservation, preservation and protection of these religious beliefs of indigenous people. And right now, there is a need that we address modern environmental challenges, for example, plastic waste challenge or disposal of waste challenge through these religions. And if we are successful in integrating the religion into conservation practices, then that will be really beneficial for protection of our environment. With this, we have completed this chapter.